They say a photograph is a secret about a secret. The more it tells you, the less you know. In the cold, biting winter of 2026, Busan was a city defined by its contradictions. It was a place made of polished glass and rusted iron. It was a place of blinding neon signs and shadows that seemed to swallow the light. Ava was a foreigner here. An outsider in every sense of the word. She was a professional photographer with a sharp eye and a simple corporate contract from an agency in London called Global Lens. She was young, she was focused, and she believed that her life was a series of planned, safe events. Ava thought her world was constructed from gallery openings, digital spreadsheets, and secure hotel rooms. She lived her life through a viewfinder, always keeping a safe distance between herself and the world she captured. But on a clear, dry Tuesday night, that distance disappeared. On that night, she captured a ghost. The night was unusually still, the kind of silence that feels like a warning. Ava stood on a high rooftop overlooking the industrial docks. Below her, the massive shipping cranes looked like sleeping giants against the ink-black water of the harbor. The air in Busan during winter has a specific, metallic bite to it. It is sharp, dry, and incredibly clean. There was no rain that night. There were no clouds to hide the silver, indifferent moon. There was only the cold light from above and the neon orange glow of the city reflecting off the oily surface of the sea. Then, a sleek black sedan pulled to the curb 5 stories below. Ava adjusted her long zoom lens, the cold metal of the camera body chilling her fingers even through her gloves. Her finger hovered over the shutter button. A man in a dark, perfectly tailored suit stepped out of the car. Even from that distance, he radiated a heavy sense of power. This was Kwon Do-hyun. To the public, he was a mystery. To the police, he was a ghost. To the underworld, he was simply the Mafia boss. He did not move like a normal man. He moved with the quiet, terrifying grace of a predator who knew he was being watched, but did not care. He stood by the car for a moment, looking out at the water, his profile sharp against the city lights. Ava held her breath. She framed the shot perfectly. She pressed the shutter. Click, in that same microsecond, she saw it. A glint of light from the rooftop directly across the street. It was a tiny, sharp reflection of glass. A sniper's scope. Ava did not have time to calculate the physics. She did not have time to scream a warning that no one would hear over the distance. Her survival instinct took over her mind. Her finger hit the remote trigger for her high-powered external strobe light, which was mounted to the railing beside her. In that dark, quiet street, the flash was like a sun exploding. It was a massive, blinding wall of white light that turned the night into a flat, colorless day for a fraction of a second. Below, the sniper flinched, his vision burned by the sudden, artificial glare. The bullet whistled through the air, a sharp shriek sound, missing the Mafia boss by less than an inch. Instead of hitting flesh, the lead tore through the reinforced glass of the car door, sending a spray of diamonds across the pavement. Ava had saved the Mafia boss. And in that 1 second, she had destroyed her own life. She did not wait to see what happened next. She grabbed her gear, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird in a cage. She ran. She took the stairs 2 at a time, her heavy boots echoing like drumbeats in the concrete stairwell. She reached the street level, blended into the shadows of an alleyway, and made her way back to her Airbnb with her head down. By the time she reached her room and locked the deadbolt, the news was already screaming from every digital billboard and smartphone in the city. The Mafia boss had been attacked. The reporters were saying he was dead. They were saying a war for the city was about to begin, and that the streets would soon run red with the blood of his rivals. But as Ava sat on the edge of her bed, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold her camera, she looked at the digital screen. Frame 402. He was not dead. In the photo, his eyes were wide, glowing with the reflection of her flash. He was looking directly into her lens. He knew. In that moment of chaos, Quan Du Hyan had seen exactly where the light had come from. He knew someone had saved him. Now, a logical mind would ask a simple question. How does a mafia boss find a single girl in a city of millions? Especially a girl who is a traveler with no roots in the city. Ava was careful. She was a professional. She did not leave a memory card behind at the scene. She did not drop her ID. She was staying in a secure apartment that had been vetted by her international company. She believed she was invisible. But in 2026, nobody is truly anonymous. The air itself is full of data. The mafia boss did not need to follow her home like a common street thug. He didn't need to send men to comb through the hotels. The moment her flash went off, his security team, hidden in a subterranean bunker, was already working. They pulled every CCTV feed from every camera on that block. They ran her gait, her height, and her face through a private, high-speed recognition database. But the real mistake was digital. When Ava got home, her camera did exactly what it was programmed to do. It detected the apartment's Wi-Fi. It began to automatically sync and back up the saved shot to her company's secure server in London. It was a routine procedure. A safety measure. His hackers intercepted that signal in the air. They didn't just have her face anymore. They had her digital fingerprint. They had her GPS coordinates. They had her Instagram handle and her private home address in London. They had her entire life laid out on a monitor before she had even finished taking off her coat. By the time she sat at her desk to catch her breath, they were already inside her world. Ava sat at her desk, locking the deadbolt for the third time. She felt safe behind the wood and steel. She thought the walls could protect her. But then, a sound made her jump. Her printer. She had not touched it. It was not even plugged into her laptop. But the machine began to whir and click in the silence. Asterisk whir. Click. Whir, asterisk. A single sheet of paper slid out onto the tray. Ava picked it up, and her blood turned to ice. It was a satellite map of her childhood home in London. A thick, wet red circle was drawn around her mother's front door. Then, her smart speakers crackled with static. A voice filled the room. It was deep, calm, and absolutely terrifying. The mafia boss was speaking to her through her own home. He said, "I like the curtains, Ava. But the lock on your window is flimsy. My men are at your door. Do not make them kick it in. It would be a shame to ruin such a nice apartment." Ava looked at her laptop. The tiny green recording light next to the camera was glowing steadily. He was watching her. He was in the room without being in the room. This was why they called him the ghost. He was everywhere and nowhere at once. He continued. "Your company did not send you here for an art exhibition, Ava. They sold your location to the men who tried to kill me tonight. You were never meant to be a photographer. You were meant to be the bait. The distraction. And now. You are the only witness left alive. Get in the elevator. Now." The elevator ride felt like a descent into another dimension. The numbers on the digital display flickered in a pale, cold blue as the car dropped toward the basement level. Ava clutched her camera bag to her chest, her knuckles white. She could feel the weight of the locket Sterling had given her, the gift she now realized was a leash. When the doors slid open, there was no lobby. There was only a dimly lit concrete parking garage. A black electric sedan sat idling in the center of the lane, its headlights cutting through the damp air like two predatory eyes. The passenger door opened automatically with a soft, pneumatic hiss. Ava hesitated for only a second. Behind her, in the stairwell, she heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of tactical boots. The men from Global Lens were close. She dove into the back seat of the sedan, and the door sealed shut before she could even catch her breath. The car moved in total silence. There was no driver. The steering wheel turned itself, guided by the same invisible hand that had hijacked her printer and her speakers. As the car sped through the industrial tunnels of Busan, Ava watched the city change. The neon lights of the tourist districts faded, replaced by the towering, rusted skeletons of the shipping yards. This was the Mafia boss's kingdom, a world of salt, steel, and secrets. They reached a heavy iron gate at the edge of the pier. It opened with a groan, revealing a ramp that led deep underground. The air grew colder, smelling of ozone and the deep, pressurized scent of the ocean. When the car finally stopped, Ava stepped out into a space that looked more like a laboratory than a hideout. This was the nerve center of Quan Du Haiyan's empire. Walls of glass monitors displayed live satellite feeds, decrypted bank ledgers, and biometric data of every ship entering the port. In the center of the room, the Mafia boss sat on the edge of a steel table. He had discarded his suit jacket. His white silk shirt was open, revealing a jagged, bleeding wound on his shoulder where the sniper's bullet had grazed him. He didn't look like a man in pain, he looked like a man observing a fascinating problem. He looked at Ava, his dark eyes scanning her as if he were reading her metadata. He said, "You're late. My men said you stopped to breathe. In my world, breathing is a luxury you earn after the job is done." Ava's fear was suddenly eclipsed by a spark of defiance. She reached into her bag, pulled out a sterile kit she always carried for her travels, and walked toward him. She said, "In my world, we don't bleed out on steel tables while lecturing people on their punctuality. Sit still." The Mafia boss watched her with a dangerous curiosity as she cleaned the wound. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the hum of the cooling fans from the server racks. As she began to stitch the skin, she felt his muscles tense, but he didn't make a sound. He whispered, "You have steady hands, Ava. That's why you're a great photographer. You know how to hold a moment still. But do you know what you're holding right now?" Ava didn't look up. She focused on the needle. She said, "I'm holding a man who owes me his life." The Mafia boss let out a short, dry laugh. He said, "You're holding a target. And because you touched that target, you've become one too." He gestured to one of the monitors. A live news feed from London was playing. The headline read, "Rising star photographer Ava Mills missing in Busan, foul play suspected." Below the headline was a statement from Global Lens. Mr. Sterling appeared on screen, looking devastated, wiped a fake tear, and claimed that Ava had been struggling with mental instability before her disappearance. Ava's hand slipped, the needle pricking the skin. She stared at the screen. She said, "He's erasing me. He's making it look like I ran away, or worse." Du Haiyan leaned back, his eyes fixed on the screen. He said, "He's doing more than that. Look at the timestamp on the suicide note they just leaked to the press. It was uploaded to their servers 3 hours before the sniper even took the shot on the roof." The realization hit Ava like a physical blow. The betrayal wasn't a reaction to her saving him. It was the plan all along. She was never meant to go back to London. She was meant to be the tragic victim of a Mafia hit that would justify a massive international crackdown on the Busan ports, allowing Global Lens to seize control of the trade routes. She was the bait. And the Mafia boss was the catch. Du Haiyan looked at her, and for a fleeting second, the coldness in his eyes softened. He said, "They think they've cleared the board. They think I'm dead and you're a memory. They forgot that shadows don't stay in the box." He stood up, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. He walked to a console and tapped a sequence of keys. A new folder appeared on the main screen. It was titled, "The Invisible Chapter." He said, "You want to know why I let you save me, Ava? Because I needed a witness who wasn't on my payroll. I needed someone who could see through their light." For the next several hours, the Mafia boss pulled back the curtain on the world Ava thought she knew. He showed her the digital ledgers. Global Lens wasn't an agency, it was a front for a multinational conglomerate that specialized in structural takeovers. They would find a city, find a local power, and create a scandal to topple them. Ava watched as her own life was picked apart. Every photo she had ever taken for them had been tagged with hidden metadata that tracked the locations of political dissidents and trade rivals. She had been their most effective spy, and she hadn't even known it. By the time the clocks in the bunker hit 4 a.m., Ava felt like a stranger in her own skin. She looked at her camera, the tool she had used to unknowingly destroy lives. She asked, "What do we do now?" The Mafia boss turned to her. The blue light of the monitors made him look like a phantom. He said, "We give them exactly what they want. We disappear. But while the world thinks we're gone, we're going to burn their empire down from the inside. We're going to take the photos they never wanted the world to see." He handed her a new camera, a custom-built rig with no serial number and a lens that could see through the dark. He said, "Welcome to the shadows, Ava. Try not to blink." The next 7 days did not exist on any calendar. For Ava, time became a series of low-light captures and the smell of salt spray. They didn't stay in the bunker. The Mafia boss knew that a stationary target was a dead one. They moved through a network of cold sites, apartments hidden behind the facades of laundromats, abandoned seafood packing plants, and luxury penthouses that were officially listed as under construction. Each night, they moved. Each night, Ava learned a new way to be invisible. The Mafia boss was a meticulous teacher. He didn't just show her how to hide her body, he showed her how to hide her digital wake. He taught her that every time she checked her reflection in a window, she was giving herself away to the city's facial recognition grid. He taught her that the hum of a smartphone was a siren for a predator. By the third night, they were perched on the rusted catwalk of a grain silo overlooking the northern pier. The wind was howling, a savage, freezing gale that threatened to throw them into the black churn of the harbor below. The Mafia boss stood behind her, his hand steadying her shoulder as she aimed her new lens at a private yacht docked at Pier 9. He whispered, "Look past the lights, Ava. Don't focus on the men. Focus on what they're carrying." Through the viewfinder, Ava saw Mr. Sterling. He looked exhausted, his silver hair windswept. He was meeting with a high-ranking official from the Ministry of Trade. Between them sat a heavy, lead-lined briefcase. Ava whispered back, "Why lead? What are they transporting that needs a radiation shield?" Du Hyen's voice was cold. He said, "It's not radiation. It's a signal dampener. Inside that case is the master key for the city's smart grid. If Sterling gets that out of the country, he doesn't just own the port. He owns the power, the water, and the traffic. He can turn Busan off with a single keystroke." Ava's finger tightened on the shutter. Asterisk click. Click, asterisk. She wasn't just taking photos, she was documenting the sale of a city's soul. As they climbed down the silo, the Mafia boss stopped. He looked at her, his face inches from hers in the dark. He asked, "Does it hurt? Seeing the man you trusted sell your life and his own country in the same breath?" Ava looked at the digital screen, at the grain of Sterling's face. She said, "It doesn't hurt. It clarifies things. It makes me realize that the world I thought was civilized was just a better-dressed version of the one you live in." Du Hyen leaned closer. The scent of him, smoke and cold rain, filled her senses. He said, "There is a difference, Ava. In my world, we know we are monsters. In theirs, they pretend to be saints. I'd rather die as I am than live as he does." On the fifth night, the war turned inward. They had found the mole. They were hiding in a safe house that was nothing more than a glass box perched on the 60th floor of an unfinished skyscraper. The wind whistled through the gaps in the steel beams. The Mafia boss sat at a laptop, his face illuminated by a scrolling wall of green code. He said, "I've been tracing the encrypted pings from Sterling's yacht. They aren't going to London. They're going to a handset inside this city. Someone in my inner circle is feeding him our GPS coordinates every time we move. Ava felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. She thought of the men she had seen in the bunker, the silent, loyal soldiers who had guarded Du Hyan for years. She asked. Who? Du Hyan didn't answer. Instead, he pulled up a CCTV feed from an hour ago. It showed a man standing in a dark alley behind a noodle shop. It was Min Ho, his most trusted lieutenant. The man who had driven Ava to the bunker on that first night. Ava watched as Min Ho pulled a burner phone from his pocket, typed a short message, and then destroyed the phone under his heel. The Mafia boss closed the laptop. The silence that followed was terrifying. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He simply stood up and checked the weight of his knife. He said. Loyalty is the only currency that matters in the dark. When someone devalues it, the debt must be paid in full. He looked at Ava. He said. Tomorrow, we go to the warehouse. We're going to give Min Ho exactly what he wants. We're going to give him a target. Ava realized then that she was the target. She was the bait again. But this time, she wasn't an accidental victim. She was part of the trap. The sixth night was the longest. They stayed in a small, damp basement beneath a fish market. The sound of the ice machines hummed above them. Neither of them slept. The Mafia boss spent the hours cleaning his weapons. Ava spent the hours cleaning her lenses. It was their ritual, their way of preparing for the end. She asked. If we don't make it tomorrow, what happens to the photos? Du Hyan looked at her. He said. I've set a dead man's switch. If my heart rate flatlines, every image you've taken, every decrypted ledger, and every recording of Sterling's meetings will be uploaded to every major news outlet in Asia and Europe. The world will know the truth, Ava. Even if we aren't there to hear them talk about it. He walked over to her and took the camera from her hands, setting it on a crate. He took her hands in his. He whispered. You were never meant to be a ghost, Ava. You were meant to be the light. I am sorry I dragged you into the gray. Ava leaned her forehead against his chest. She said. Don't be sorry. I spent my whole life looking through a lens, watching other people live. For the first time. I'm actually in the frame. The morning of the seventh day broke with a sky the color of a bruised plum. They drove toward the warehouse at the edge of the harbor. The trap was set. The mole was hungry. And the king was ready to reclaim his throne. The warehouse was a cathedral of rust. Located at the furthest tip of Pier 14, it was a place where the city's light didn't reach. The only illumination came from the rhythmic, sweeping beams of the lighthouse across the bay, which cut through the salt-crusted windows every 10 seconds like a searchlight in a prison yard. Ava sat in the center of the floor, her hands bound to a heavy iron chair with industrial zip ties. The plastic bit into her skin, but she didn't struggle. She kept her head down, her hair obscuring her face, exactly as the Mafia boss had instructed. She could hear the heavy, rhythmic dripping of water from a leaky pipe, echoing in the vast, empty space. Then, the heavy steel door groaned open. A group of men entered. At the front was Min Ho, the lieutenant who had sold his loyalty for a dream of power. Behind him, looking hopelessly out of place in his expensive wool coat, was Mr. Sterling. He looked at Ava with a mix of pity and cold calculation. Sterling spoke first. His voice was thin, echoing off the corrugated metal walls. He said. Oh, Ava. You were always so talented. If you had just stayed in the hotel, you'd be on a flight to London right now. We could have made you a star. Why did you have to go looking for the man behind the curtain? Ava didn't look up. She whispered. The man behind the curtain is the only one who told me the truth about you, Sterling. Sterling sighed, checking his watch. He said. The truth is a luxury for people who don't have a bottom line. Minho, where is he? The signal said he was with her. Minho stepped forward, his hand on the grip of his pistol. He growled. He's here. He wouldn't leave his new pet alone. He's in the rafters. I can feel him. Suddenly, the lighthouse beam swept through the room, and for a fraction of a second, the warehouse was bathed in blinding white. In that heartbeat of light, a shadow dropped from the ceiling. It wasn't a man falling, it was a predator striking. Quan Du Hien hit the concrete with a silent roll and came up with a blade in each hand. The first two guards didn't even have time to scream. The Mafia boss moved with a speed that defied the human eye, a whirlwind of black silk and steel. The room erupted into chaos. Gunfire shattered the silence, the muzzle flashes illuminating the warehouse in jagged, strobe-like bursts. Ava watched, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the Mafia boss dive behind a stack of shipping crates, bullets chewing the wood into splinters just inches from his head. Minho was screaming orders, his voice cracking with panic. He knew he was fighting a ghost. He knew that in this darkness, the Mafia boss was the only one who could truly see. Ava didn't stay idle. She reached into the lining of her sleeve and pulled out the small, sharpened piece of a broken lens she had hidden there. She began to saw at the zip ties. The plastic was thick, but her hands were steady. She focused on the rhythm of the gunfire, using it to mask the sound of her escape. Just as the ties snapped, Sterling moved toward her, his face twisted in a mask of desperation. He reached for the heavy briefcase, the master key to the city. Sterling hissed. I'm not leaving without the prize, Ava. Ava stood up, her legs shaking but her resolve ironclad. She grabbed her camera, the custom rig the Mafia boss had given her, and aimed it directly at Sterling's face. She shouted. You've already lost, Sterling. Look at the uplink. On the small digital screen on the back of the camera, a green progress bar was at 99%. She had been recording the entire confrontation. Every word Sterling had said, every face of every traitor, was being streamed live to the Mafia boss's hidden server. The Mafia boss emerged from the smoke behind Sterling. He was bleeding from a graze on his forehead, his eyes burning with a cold, righteous fury. He didn't fire his weapon. He didn't have to. He said. The world is watching, Sterling. You wanted to be a saint. Now the world knows you're just a ghost in a suit. Sterling looked at the camera, then at the Mafia boss. He realized the trap wasn't the warehouse. The trap was the truth. He dropped the briefcase, his knees hitting the cold concrete. He was a broken man, his empire turning to ash in the time it took for a single flash to fire. The police sirens began to wail in the distance, not the city police Sterling had bought, but the harbor authorities the Mafia boss had alerted. Du Hien grabbed Ava's hand. He said. We have to go. The light is coming. They fled through the back of the warehouse, disappearing into the labyrinth of shipping containers just as the blue and red lights began to flood the pier. The final scene took place on the Diamond Bridge. The sun was beginning to bleed over the horizon, turning the gray waters of the bay into a sea of molten gold. They stood at the very top of the suspension cables, where the wind was so strong it felt like it could strip the skin from their bones. The Mafia boss stood at the railing, looking out at the city he had protected and terrorized in equal measure. He pulled out 2 passports. One was hers. One was his. He said. I have a plane waiting in a private field. We can be in the Swiss Alps by tomorrow night. We can be whoever we want to be. Ava looked at the passport. She looked at the name printed on the page, a name she didn't recognize. She looked at the city below, waking up to a day of scandal and revelation. She took her passport and his. She didn't look at the names. She simply held them out over the edge of the bridge. She asked. If we go there, are we still invisible? Du Hien looked at her, his expression softening into something like peace. He said. In that world, everyone would see us. But they would never know us. Ava let the passports go. They fluttered like white birds, dancing in the updraft before plummeting into the dark, indifferent water below. She stepped toward him, her hand finding his. She said. I don't want to be seen. I want to be real. They didn't wait for the sun to fully rise. They turned away from the city, away from the light, and walked back into the shadows of the bridge. The world would talk about the invisible king of Busan for years to come. They would talk about the photographer who vanished into thin air. They would look at the photos she left behind, the images that toppled an empire, and they would wonder who she really was. But they would never find her. Because Ava Mills was dead. And the Mafia boss had finally found his ghost. The moral is a simple one, though the world refuses to learn it. We spend our lives chasing the light, thinking that to be seen is to be loved. We post our faces on screens, we shout our names into the void, and we pray for someone to notice. But the light is where the predators hide. The light is where the lies are polished. True power isn't being known by the world. True power is being known by the only person who matters. Safety is a beautiful lie told to children. Only loyalty is real. Sometimes, you have to disappear from the world to finally find your place in it. Ava and Kwan Du Hyan are still out there. In the heart of the city, in the quiet of the mountains, or in the static between the signals. They are watching. They are waiting. And they are finally, truly, invisible.